This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning everyone. Bruchim Abam. So we're going to continue our regular Shiur, but we're going to do something a little bit different. We actually started a series, and this year is dedicated by my good friend Rabbi Glatstein Rose in Los Angeles, Lili Nishna's brother, Tzvi ben Levi Yitzchak, and Nisham Shav Aliyah. So now we're continuing a series on Parshas Shemini, a very interesting topic that comes from the Sefer of Rabbi Yeshua Heller. The name of the Sefer is Beis Tefillah. And this is based on a Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says, and this is just by way of introduction, I have to give you about a 5 to 10 minute introduction because we're up to part 5. If you want to get the whole thing, you could listen to the first 4 Shiurim, but we're up to part 5. The Yerushalmi says that Shmuel was addressing the difficulty that some of the Amoram would have having kavanah by Shemoneh Esrei. I think we could all admit that Shemoneh Esrei is one area, and davening in general is an area that we have a difficulty focusing our mind. Sometimes when we learn, so otherwise if you're not focused, you're not doing anything, but with davening you could sort of mouth the words and your mind wanders. And this is not a recent phenomenon, this is an age-old problem. And Rava said, basically, he never was able to have kavanah until he just started thinking about a certain order of officials and governors, and that we explained in the first year. But Shmuel came along and said that I don't have a problem having kavanah. Why? Because I count the birds, which is an inexplicable statement. How does counting birds help you have kavanah by davening? If anything, that would be a great distraction. So Rabbi Yeshua Heller basically developed a whole thesis, a whole sefer. He wrote a whole sefer on one line of Yerushalmi, where Shmuel says that for him to have kavanah by Shemoneh Esrei, he would focus on the birds. So what's this all about? Now we know in Parsha Shemini, this week's Parsha, it lists all the non-kosher birds, because our Masorah is, the halacha is you're allowed to eat any bird as long as it's not one of the birds mentioned in the Torah. But we are further machmir that we have to have a Masorah for it. But midoraisa, as long as it's not one of the birds mentioned in the Torah, you're allowed to eat it. Now, how many birds are mentioned in this week's Parsha? You have the Nesher, Peres, Ozniah, 3. Da, Aya, another 2, that's 5. Oirev, number 6. Basayana, Tachmas, Shachaf, and Nates, that's 9. Kois, Shalach, Yanshuf, another 3, 12. Tin Shemes, Ka'as, Racham, another 3, 15. Chasida, Hanafa, Duchifas, Atalef, that's basically 19. There are 19 birds, let's try counting that one more time. How many birds? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, right? There are 20 birds, of course, mentioned in Shemini, and actually in Re'eh there are 21 birds mentioned. So how are these birds going to do anything in terms of facilitating kavanah by Shemoneh Esrei? So the first thing we started with is the Gemara in Chulin says, on Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis, a statement of Rabbi Yavohu, that the Da'ah and the Ayah and the Ra'ah and the Daya are all one bird. Wow, if they're all one bird, then it comes out, both in Shemini and in Re'eh, there are 19 birds. Well, 19 birds? Well, we know that there are 19 Berachos in Shemoneh Esrei. Bingo! Says Rabbi Yeshua Heller, if you understand the nature and the character and the essence of each bird, that will give you a deeper appreciation and understanding of each bracha of Shemoneh Esrei, and therefore he developed this whole amazing sefer, explaining how each bracha corresponds to a different bird. We happen to be up to today the bracha of Al HaTzadikim, and we are up to the bird Tin Shemes. The Tin Shemes. We are up to, I believe, the 13th bird. So you count from Nesher, Peres, Ozniah, Da, and Ayar 1. Oirev, Basayana, Tachmas, Shachaf, Nates, Kois, Shalach, Yanshuf, Tin Shemes is the 13th bird. That is the bird that corresponds to Al HaTzadikim. And In Re'eh, the bird that corresponds to Alat Tzadikim is Nesher, Peres, Azniya, Ra'ah, Oirev, Basayana, Tachmas, Shachaf, Neitz, Kois, Yanshav, Tinshamas, the Ka'as. The Ka'as is the bird that corresponds to Al HaTzadikim. So we have to explain this, but before I do that, I want to give you a brief review of the first 12 birds. Number one, the Nesher. We know one thing about the Nesher. The Nesher is the highest flying bird. And Rashi tells us in Parshas Esrei that when Hashem said He's going to carry us al kanfei nesharim, Hashem said, when the Egyptians attack you, when you leave Mitzrayim, let them throw the missile at me and I'll absorb the blow, like a Nesher who carries its young on its back and absorbs the bullets and the missiles and the arrows that are shot at it. So the Nesher is what? The ultimate magain, the ultimate shield, where the Nesher says, I'll take the blow. So too, the first bracha of Shemoneh Esrei is magain, magain Avraham. If you want to know what does it mean God is our shield, what it means is, in short, God will sometimes give us a better matzav, even if it will cause a chilul Hashem to Him. Even if it will desecrate Hashem's name. Meaning, let's say Hashem has two ways to punish us. He could send us to Gehenna, or He could send us into Galus. In Gehenna is a Kiddush Hashem, the Gemara in Eruvin says. That's, the Rishayim are matzdik the din in Gehenna. But Hashem says, no, I don't want to do that. I'd rather there be a chilul Hashem and send you into Galus, because I am the ultimate magain. Okay, and if you want to get more understanding of this, we have 4 shiurim on these 13. I'm just giving you the background. The next 2 birds are the Peres and the Ozniya. And for a certain reason, we're not going to get into now, it's backwards. The Ibn Ezra says the word Ozniya is a lashon of oiz, strength. That corresponds to the second bracha of Shemoneh Esrei, Mechaye Hamesim Gevurais. Peres means a mixture of 2. A mixture of chesed and Gevura, that corresponds to the third bracha, Yaakov. Now, in Shemini we have the Da'a and the Aya, and in Re'eh we have the Ra'ah, the Aya, and the Daya. What is that all about? Well, we know Ata Chaynein is a very rare bracha, because there are 2 parts. There's a Shvach, Ata Chaynein li Adam Das, Umlami Lenosh Bina, and there's a Bakasha, Chaynein Mitcha Deya Bina Vehaskel. Well, says Rabbi Shua Heller, the first part of the bracha has 2 parts, the second part of the bracha has 3 parts. That's why in Shemini, Keneged Das is Da'a, Keneged Bina is Aya. Because throughout Tanakh, whenever we talk about Bia, we say Bina va'aye timatzeh. So, Ata choinen li Adam Das, Da'a, Umlame lenosh Bina, Aya. Then Chanenu meyitcha Deya, you see Das has turned to Deya, so the Da'a turned into a Ra'ah. Bina remains the same, so it's the Aya, and Haskel is the Daya. We're now up to the bracha of Tshuva. Tshuva corresponds to the ravens. Why does it correspond to the raven? The Gemara said that when a raven has a baby, it doesn't recognize its youth, because ravens are black and the babies are white. That's the exact opposite of Tshuva. Tshuva, you start off black, you start off sullied, begadim sayim, and then Hashem says, I'm going to wash you, I'm going to cleanse you, I'm going to clean you. So the Oirev is the klipa of Tshuva. The Oirev is exact opposite of Tshuva. If you want to know what Tshuva is the opposite of the Oirev. Tshuva takes someone who's black and dark and he turns it into someone who is white. Then we get to the bracha of Slicha. Slicha is forgiveness, atonement. That corresponds to the Bas Hayana. The Bas Hayana is the ostrich. Now, one thing we know, in order to gain Tshuva, gain Mechila and Slicha, a person has to cry to Hashem constantly, beg Hashem for forgiveness. The ostrich, throughout Tanakh, in Eicha, the ostrich is always wailing, weeping, crying. That's why the ostrich is compared to forgiveness. Also, another thing you need to do in order to get atonement is you have to admit your sin. You can't bury your head in the ground. You can't be like the ostrich. Also, the ostrich is one bird that cannot walk backward. If you want slicha, you cannot revert back to your sin. Now we come to the tachmas. Tachmas corresponds to re'ena va'anyenu. The Ibn Ezra says the word tachmas is a lashon of chamas. The bracha of re'ena va'anyenu, we need God to redeem us, not from the galus. Re'ena is from our personal travails, from people who afflict us financially, insult us. From chamas, re'enu v'anyenu is from tachmas. Shachaf is rifa'enu. Because the word shachaf, the Ibn Ezra says, is lashon of shachefes, which is an illness. So if when you daven rifa'inu, if you want to know what are we davening for, the shachaf represents a great illness. The nates corresponds to barei chalenu. Now barei chalenu is the bracha of parnasa. So two things. Nates means feathers. This is a bird with great proliferation of feathers. It's constantly growing feathers. So in the bird world, the animal that represents shefa is the bird nates. It has so many feathers. It's always growing feathers, like a field that produces and produces. Likewise, the Gemara tells us that there are four winds, and if not for the nates, if not for this bird holding up the southern wind, the world would be destroyed. So this nates is responsible for sustenance and providing us protection from harmful winds. Then we come to the kais. The kais is an owl, which is similar to a human being. The Gemara in Chulin says it has cheeks like a human being. It has the ability to raise its voice, and it has the ability to see from far. Like the Geula, like the Kibbutz Galuyos, where there's going to be a great flag lifted up high, and there's going to be a great blast of the shofar, where it's heard from far and it's seen from far, which are the two koichos of this particular bird. That is Tikab shofar. Then the bracha of Hashiva Shoftenu Kvarishayna. Now here's where it gets very complicated, and this was the last year, and this year is also going to be complex because the next 5 birds, the Shalach, the Yanshuf, Tinshemes, Ka'as, and Racham, which are Hashiva Shoftenu Kvarishayna, V'la Malshinim, Alat Tzadikim, V'lishalayim Ircha, Es Tzemach David. These 5 birds are in a different order in Shemini and in Re'eh. And now we have to try to explain why the birds are in a different order and how these 2 orders can be explained based on Shemini and Re'eh. And it's based on the following principle, a Chiddush in the Zohar Chadash, and that is Sefer Vayikra Toras Kayanim corresponds to the era of the first Beis HaMikdash until the destruction of the second Beis HaMikdash. And Toras Kaya and Mishnah Torah Devarim is a description of Bayesheni until today. And therefore, says Rabbi Shua Heller, the Shalach bird is a fascinating bird. The Shalach bird is actually a pelican, and the Targum says it's Milashon Nuna because it scoops up fish. Now the ocean and the great waters represent the Galus. The nations of the world are compared to Mayim Rabim. Mayim Rabim lo yachlu l'chabes es ha'ahava. And the fish is Klal Yisrael. V'yidgu l'roiv b'karev ha'aretz. The Shalach represents the Geula, the redemption, the gathering the fish out of the great water. So says Rabbi Shua Heller, in Vayikra, which is Bayis Rishain, when we didn't have Malchus Beis David yet, when we only had Shoftim, we didn't have the full strength of the Melech HaMashiach. So the Geula and the strength of Klal Yisrael was Hashiva Shoftenu Kvarishayna, and therefore the Shalach is corresponding to Hashiva Shoftenu Kvarishayna. However, in Re'eh, which is Bayesheni and on, where we hope for the ultimate Geula, the Shalach is corresponding to Es Tzemach David Avdecha Mehira Satzmiach. We move on. We now move on to the Yanshuf. Now the Yanshuf is a difficult one. Yanshuf, the Ibn Ezra says, Milashon Neshef, twilight. The Galus is called the night. The Galus is called the night. However, the twilight refers to a Galus which is not so terrible, and that is a reference to Galus Bavel. Galus Bavel is called Neshef because Galus Bavel was not so long, it was only 70 years, and it was not so harsh. And therefore, Galus Bavel in Shemini corresponds to the Yanshuf. The Yanshuf, which is the bracha of Elam Al Shinim. The big Rishaim in the times of Tairas Kayanim, in times of Bayis Rishon, were Golos Bavel, the Babylonians. The Babylonians are called Neshef, the Yanshuf. However, in Mishnah Torah, the Yanshuf is Hashiva Shevtein Kvar Rishayna, because it was in Golos Bavel that we were able to establish some degree of Jewish leadership through the descendants of Malchus Beis David. Now we come to the Tinshames. So we did Hashiva Shavtein Kvar Rishayna, and we did Hashiva Shavtein Kvar Rishayna is the Shalach, and the Lamalshinim, the Rishaim, are the Yanshav, Golos Bavel. And now we're up to the Tzadikim. The Tzadikim. Now, what's very interesting is the Tinshames in Re'eh, the Kois is Tekabeh Shofar. The Yanshuf is Hashiva Shavtein Kvar Rishayna. And the Tinshames is the Rishaim. The Tinshames is V'lam Alshinim in Re'eh. And in Shemini, the Tinshames is the Tzadikim. So the first thing we have to know is one more piece of background, and then we're ready to start today's Shiur. And that is the Tinshames, aside from being a bird, is also a sheretz. It's actually the eighth sheretz. The eighth sheretz is the Tinshames. And Rashi says the sheretz Tinshames is similar to the bird Tinshames. Now we know that even though we had 4 golosim, it's 4, which is 8. Because the Medrash tells us, Lamnatseach ala Shminis, that the 4 golosim, Bavel had Kazdi, and Paras had Mada, Yavan had Moikdan, and the last golos is Yishmael and Edom. So Edom, the last golos, is compared to the last sheretz, Tinshames, which is also the bird that we're up to. We're up to the bracha of Alat Tzadikim. So Hashiva is the 11th bracha. The Tzadikim is the 12th bracha. So let's try to understand this. The Kais, look in the pasuk. The Kais is the bracha of Tekabeh Shofar. The Shalach is the bracha of Hashiva Shofteinu in Tairas Kohanim. However, in Mishnah Torah, the Kais is Tekabeh Shofar, and the Yanshuf is Hashiva Shofteinu. And now we are up to the bracha of V'lam Alshinim. So, V'lam Alshinim is the Yanshuf in Tairas Kohanim, and it's the Tinshames in Mishnah Torah. Now we understand because the wicked ones in the times of Bayis Rishon were Golos Bavel. The wicked ones in the times of Bayis Sheni and our Golos today are the Tinshames Edom. So let's just make one quick cheshbon. Rifa'inu is bracha number 8. The way we remember that is the Gemara says that Bris Milah is on the 8th day, needs a refuah. Baruch Aleinu is 9. Baruch Aleinu Mevarchim. Tekabeh Shofar is 10. Hashiva is 11. V'lam Alshinim is 12. Now we're up to bracha 13. We're up to what is the Tinshames in Shemini and the Ka'as in Re'eh. So let's try to understand that. Why is Golos Edom, the Tzadikim, why is Golos Edom, oh boy, one second. Why is Golos Edom, the Tzadikim, in Tairas Kayanim, and in Mishnah Torah, it's the Ka'as? So let's get some background, and we're ready to start the Shiur in number 3. This is from the Sefer Beis Tefillah, page Chav Zayin. So he says we've already answered why the Yanshuf in Mishnah Torah is, and the Shalach in Taras Kohanim is Hashiva. And we explain why the Tinshames in Mishnah Torah is V'lam Alshinim and the Yanshef in Taras Kayanim. Now let's travel on and try to explain the bracha that corresponds to the tzaddikim. That in Vayikra, the bracha of tzaddikim is the Tinshames, and in Mishnah Torah it's the Ka'as. Now and in V'lirushalayim, in Taras Kayanim it's the Ka'as, and in Mishnah Torah it's the Rachama. And as Tzemach David is the Racham in Shemini, and the Shalach in Re'eh. Now, we already said in an earlier shiur, the Shalach is the bird of Geula. So in Re'eh, which is corresponding to the Bayesheni, the bracha of Geula is a Tzemach David. But another thing we have to try to understand is, why is it in Shemini it's the Racham, and in Re'eh it's the Ruchama? So here we go. Says the Divrei Yehoshua, the Rabbi Shua Heller and the Beis Tefillah, we need 3 pieces of information. Number 1, the Zohar tells us, what is a tzaddik? What does one have to be in order to be considered a tzaddik? Someone has to guard the bris milah. Yosef guarded the bris milah. Yosef was tempted with Eshes Potiphera, and he did not succumb, and therefore Yosef is called Tzaddik Yesoid Olam. That's number 1. Guarding the bris milah is the way we become a tzaddik. Number 2, the Zohar says that the koyach of the Samach Mem, the koyach of the Sar of Amalek, is, where does Amalek get his koyach from? From causing ruination to the kedusha of the bris milah. That's why the Malach of Esav wrestled with Yaakov and he struck him bekaf Yerechai, because that's the area of the bris milah. That's why Amalek took the bris and he threw it klape mala. So in other words, a tzaddik is somebody who guards his bris. The opposite, the klipa of a tzaddik, is someone who does not guard the bris. And the third thing is, of all averos that Hashem says, I'm going to throw you out of Eretz Yisrael, I'm going to vomit you out of Eretz Yisrael, is arayas, not guarding the bris milah. In Bamidbar Rabbah, it says in the Parsha of the Soita, it says, Kumu ulachu, ki loy zois hamenucha ba'avor tama techabel v'chevel nimratz. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, for other averos, I could tolerate, but not for arayos. That's why in Parshas Achrei Mos Kedoshim, Parak Yud Ches Pasuk Chaf Hei, right after the Parsha of arayos, God says, if you're gonna indulge in arayos, v'ataki ha'aretz, I'm gonna vomit you out. Wow, now we get a little bit of an insight into the bird ka'as. Ka'as is a language of vomit. So now we have to try to understand why it is that the bracha of tzaddikim in Parshas Shemini is the Tinshames, which is Edom, and it's the Ka'as in Re'eh. The Yushalayim is the Ka'as in Shemini and the Ruchama in Re'eh, and the Racham is a Tzemach David. So here we go. Number 6 on your sheets. Says Rabbi Shua Heller, I'm going to read and you can try to follow inside. I'm going to translate that the Avera being Poigim and Bris Milah causes Klal Yisrael to be exiled from their land, more than any other Avera. And he quotes the Medrash that we just quoted. And on the 4th line in the 2nd column, Rabbi Shua Heller quotes the Reishis Chachma, who brings many Zohars, that when Eretz Yisrael is in its Kedusha, it cannot be Soivel Arayos. And it's Metame the land with Zima. That's why right after the Parsha of Arayos, it says, Al tetamu b'chol eila, v'loisaki ha'aretz eschem b'tamachem oisa, and it says, Vatitma ha'aretz, vataki etz yoshveha. However, the Kuzari explains that when does Eretz Yisrael vomit out those who act and indulge in arayas? It's only when Klal Yisrael is there. When Klal Yisrael is in Eretz Yisrael and the Shechina is in Eretz Yisrael, so then Hashem cannot tolerate arayos. Hashem cannot tolerate even a shemetz of znus. Or when Klal Yisrael makes up their mind to go back to Eretz Yisrael, says Rabbi Shua Heller, then the Shechina is with Klal Yisrael, and also the land cannot tolerate znus. But once the Shechina is not in Eretz Yisrael from Churban Bayis Rishon and on, where the Shechina did not come back, and even in Bayis Sheni the Shechina was not there, then the earth could tolerate. Eretz could tolerate our eyes because the Shechina is not there. So with these introductions, says Rabbi Shoheller in the next paragraph, we could explain the relationship of the Tinshames and the Ka'as with these two brachos, because in Shemini, the Tinshames is Tzadikim and the Ka'as is Yushalayim, and in Re'eh, the Ka'as is Tzadikim and the Ruchama is Yushalayim. So let's explain this. The bracha of Tzadikim is reserved for those who guard the Bris HaKedusha. And the klipa of the tzaddikim, what stands against the tzaddikim, what's yoinek from the klipa of tzaddikim is Amalek, is Edom. So therefore the tinshames, which is Golos Edom, like we explained, that's the Merkava of Amalek. So therefore in Toras Kohanim, the bracha of the klipa of the tzaddikim is a tinshames, because it corresponds to the tzaddikim who guard the bris. But the birds in Mishnah Torah, those birds represent the future from Bayis Sheni and on. So that's the time that Amalek and Edom is completely rules over us and destroyed our house. So now we need to daven to destroy them, and therefore the Tinshames corresponds to V'lam Shinim. So it's no longer Koneged the Tzadikim. You see, in the first bias, it opposed the tzaddikim. By Sheni, we need to destroy the tinshamas. We need to destroy Adam. We need to daven alti sikva v'chalarisha kwega toived. It's not enough that until now it's yoinek from the pagam habris, but it's trying to completely destroy us, and therefore we need to designate a bracha for it and destroy the tinshamas. Now let's talk about the ka'as. The ka'as is, we said, the bird of vomit. The Rabbi Shoheller says the Pashtanim explain that the reason why it's called the ka'as is because it vomits its food, and therefore it's close to the word ka'as, but when it says vataki haaretz es yoshveha, and it represents Hashem Shechina leaving Eretz Yisrael. Therefore, we're mavakesh in Vilushalayim. In Vilushalayim corresponds to the ka'as, because we have to daven. We know Hashem, you ejected us, you spat us out of Eretz Yisrael, you vomited us out because of our inadequacies. So if you want to know how to be ma'or kavana for Vilushalayim, think of the ka'as. You think of the bird that represents us being expelled from Eretz Yisrael. This corresponds to Vilushalayim, because Yushalayim has the nature of the ka'as to expel its inhabitants when they act improperly. But when it comes to Mishnah Torah, from the second bias and on, so we don't want to refer to Yushalayim as the ka'as, the bird that expelled its inhabitants. Now the ka'as refers to the tzadikim. What does that mean? Because in Bayis Sheni, the Kedusha of Yushalayim was not so great that it would expel its inhabitants. You see, in the Bayis Rishon, Shemini, Yushalayim had the holiness that it would be like a ka'as and it expel its inhabitants. But in Bayis Sheni, Yushalayim did not have that Kedusha that it would expel its inhabitants. Like the Kuzari said, Yushalayim only expels its inhabitants when it has a high level of Kedusha. However, the Ka'as represents the Tzadikim, because the Tzadikim at least still have a certain degree of Kedusha that Hashem does not tolerate inadequacies among the Tzadikim. But then the Rabbi Shoheller adds one nekuda. The Gemara in Chulin, Daf Samach Gimel, says in number 7, Rabbi Yehuda, the Ka'as is a kook, or some Rishonim say the cuckoo bird. Look at number 8, the cuckoo bird. It's a kind of raven, actually, that's called cuckoo. And we actually discussed this earlier. that not only does it vomit, but it spits its zera out of its mouth. It commits arayos through its mouth. It's able to be mazriya zera through its mouth. Just like the oirev had tashmish hamita on the teva, it was mazriya toich piv, shaloi kederach haaretz. This is another kind of oirev. So it says Rabbi Shuheller, even though the oirev was already mentioned, this is a specific kind of oirev, which is specifically connected to arayos, and therefore this ka'as represents Yerushalayim and Bayis Rishon, that Yerushalayim cannot tolerate arayos, and it corresponds to the tzaddikim in Bayis Sheni. And now we're up to, this is Oyom V'Noira. Now we're up to the Racham. Some translate it as a stork. And the Racham is corresponding to Es Tzemach David in Shemini, and V'Yushalayim in Re'eh. Now, one thing that's very curious is why in Shemini is this Racham a Zachar, and in Re'eh it's an Nekeva. Why in Shemini is it Racham, and in Re'eh it's a Nekeva? And Rabbi Shuheller opens up the world. He said, you ever realize, first thing we know is that on Purim, Rabbi Lezer HaKalir wrote Kroivitz for Purim. He only wrote a Kroivitz for V'Yushalayim and not for Semach David. So even though we've said many pshatim in this, the pasha pshat is because V'Yushalayim and Semach David is really one bracha. Why do we want to go back to Yerushalayim? Because we want to restore Malchus Beis David. Now sometimes we could go back to Yerushalayim and Malchus Beis David is not restored, like at the end of Bayis Rishon, beginning of Bayis Sheni. We went back to Yerushalayim, but we didn't restore Bayis Sheni. But in the future, we want to return to Yerushalayim, that V'Yushalayim and Semach David go together. Now, V'Yushalayim is Lashon Nekeva. V'Yushalayim Ercha Brachim Tov V'Sishka M'Seicha Kasher Dibrat V'nei Oisah Karbi Yemenu Binyan V'Chisei Dom Nehel Seicha Tachin. Yerushalayim, the Baruch Yerushalayim is Nekeva. But as Tzemach David, Avdachamir says V'Karnoi. Tamishal Kilish was as Tzemach David, Avdachamir Satzmir V'Karnoi. You ever realize V'Yushalayim is Nekeva and as Tzemach David is Zachar? That's why in Shemini the Racham is corresponding to Semach David. Semach David is a bracha which is Zachar, so therefore it's Racham. But in Re'eh, it's referring to Yerushalayim, which is Nekeva, and therefore it's Rachama. That alone, I tell you, if you could explain this to a kaifer, there would be no kaiferim. If you could explain this sefer of Yeshua Heller, how every little prat uprat of these birds corresponds perfectly to every detail of Shemoneh Esrei, the whole world would be ma'aminim b'nei ma'aminim. I'm telling you, if somebody wants a chizuk and emunah, learn this be'iyun, it's oyom v'noira. But one more thing we know about the Racham. The Gemara says that if this Racham would whistle, Mashiach would come right away. Says Gemara in Chula number 9, Racham zu sharakrak. This Racham is the bird, the sharakrak. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Lama nikra shmai Racham. Kivan shaba Racham. When the Racham comes, ba'u Rachamim la'ilam. Amar Rav Bibi bar Abaye. Rav Bibi bar Abaye said, V'hu diyasiv amidi. It will sit on a pole v'avid sharakrak. Ugamiri diyasiv ha'ara v'shark. If it whistles on the ground, asa mashicha. If this bird would whistle on the ground, the Mashiach would come. Like the pasuk says, Eshrika lohem va'akabtseim. I will whistle and redeem them. By the way, this pasuk Eshrika, Shin Reish Kuf, is a remez that the Aleph Beis backward is Geula. But that's for another occasion. Okay, so let's look through number 11 and we'll conclude. And Be'ezus Hashem, next year, Shemini, Hashem should give us all good health and gezint. We should be able to finish up the Shemoneh Esrei, to do Shema Koilenu, Ritzei, Moedim, Sim Shalom. And by the way, you know what bracha corresponds to Sim Shalom? The bat. You know it, the bat. When we have Shalom from bats, the world is a better place. So, but now we're up to the stork. Why in Shemini does the stork correspond to Yerushalayim? Again, that's Geula. Excuse me. Why in Shemini does it correspond to the Racham? And in Re'eh, it corresponds to V'Yerushalayim. Says Rabbi Shua Heller, the bracha of the Racham in Torah's Kaihanim is as Tzemach David, and in Devarim it's V'Yerushalayim. Also, why is it changed from Zachar to Nekeva? In Vayikra it's Zachar, and in Devarim it's Nekeva. Now this bird, like we said, is a bird that could whistle, and if it whistles, Mashiach would come. So this is the bird of the Basura of Geula, and therefore it corresponds to these brachos. In Devarim it's Yerushalayim, and in Vayikra it's Tzemach David. Why? Let's explain. The bracha of Yerushalayim is Lashon Nekeva, V'sishkam b'seicha, not b'seichai. Uvnei oisa l'seicha. The bracha Tzemach David is V'karnoi. Therefore, this bracha in Shemini, when it corresponds to Tzemach David, it's Lashon Zachar, Racham. And in Devarim, where it corresponds to Yerushalayim, which is Nekeva, it's called Rachama. Now, why does it correspond to Tzemach David? And in Devarim, it corresponds to Yerushalayim. The answer is because Vayikra is the Geula from Galus Bavel. Until Vayikra talks about the Geula from Galus Bavel. That's why Hashiva Shofteinu is Galus Bavel. That's why, the V'lam al Shinim is Galus Bavel. They were the Rishaim. And the redemption of Galus Bavel is Shemini. And in Shemini, in Galus Bavel, Malchus Beis David was not restored. Only Yerushalayim was built. So since the whistle of the Racham is the coming of Mashiach, it obviously did not whistle B'binyan Yerushalayim, because Ben David did not come B'binyan Yerushalayim. Therefore, the Racham is as Tzemach David, because it clearly did not whistle with the Berachos Yerushalayim. However, the Tzmichas Keren LeDavid that we're hoping for was not connected to the building of Yerushalayim in the times of the redemption from Galus Bavel. So the Racham was not connected to Yerushalayim, but rather Tzemach David. But in Devarim, we're hoping for the Gula Hasida, the Gula Soilam, and in the Gula Hasida, we know Yerushalayim and Malchus Beis David are interconnected. As Yushalmi says, it says, Boinei Yerushalayim Hashem, Nidchei Yisrael Yechanes. Therefore, the building of Yerushalayim is for sure the beginning of the Geula, and then the whistling of Yerushalayim will bring the Geula. Therefore, the whistling of the Rachama will be with the building of Yerushalayim, and which was not by Bayesheni. And in Mishnah Torah, the Shalach is as Tzemach David, because that is the complete redemption. And now we've explained these 5 birds that have a distinction between Re'eh and Shemini, namely the Shalach, the Yanshaf, Tinshamas, the Kas, and the Racham. And please Hashem, give us Siyata D'Shmaya to finish up the whole series, Be'ezus Hashem, next year, where we hope to explain the final 4 brachas of Shemoneh Esrei, namely the Chasida, which actually I made a mistake before. The Racham is not the stork, the Chasida. So the Chasida is Shema Koilenu. The Anafa is Moidim. The Duchifas. No, I'm sorry. The Chasida is Shema Koilenu. The Anafa is Ritzei. The Duchifas is Moidim. And the Atalef is Shalom. So we hope to finish the final 4 birds of Shemoneh Esrei next year. I'm going to unmute you now, and in 5 minutes we're going to have the Shiur on Perkei Avos.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.